So this video is on responsive design in a Microsoft Power Platform Canvas app. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. I like to be able to make my apps more responsive, particularly to different screen resolutions, to ensure we make more accessible apps that protect things like font size and make them easier accessible to all staff that want to use them. So there's some fundamentals that I want to go through today and cover off. It's going to be more of an introductory video to the concept of responsive design. So we'll touch on the real base building and then follow on with another video to do the more advanced stuff from screen to screen. So today we should cover things like positioning items, shrinking down to say doing a mobile view and a desktop view so that things automatically position themselves better. So my name's Daniel Halls. Welcome to Power Platform Principles. Let's get started with our Canvas app. So what I want to do is I want to do some of the real foundation elements of building a responsive design app. I've got just a standard desktop app open in the Canvas App Studio. It's completely blank, as you can see. I've also got it running in play mode here. Again, completely blank, so there's nothing on it. But the idea is we'll just start to add pieces and publish those changes and show you how that then is represented on the other screen. The premise is simple. We're going to just put things on the page like header, a subheader, maybe a footer, maybe a button, just some common type bits that we would put in to make things look a little bit nicer, and use those as examples of how we position elements responsively in the app. So to start with, let's put a header and a footer on. Let's get those in play and just show you how they would look and how we would do those normally. So this is the normal way of doing it. So we might just insert a label. And the text might here just be header. I need to change the font color. There we go. With Power Apps, obviously, if you're just doing a standard app that's not responsive, you can use your drag and drop functionality to the heart's content. You might end up being a little bit picky like me, and you might end up resetting numbers. But the drag and drop, snap to sort of approach, it works really, really well if you're just doing a standard non-responsive app. And we might say, let's fill that with a nice color. Actually, I could leave that font white, couldn't I? Because we could put that on the dark background like that and make it 24. That's too big. Or we might make it taller. It doesn't matter. This is the bit. This is the bit where I start to get really pernickety about how it looks. And it's, if you watched any of my other videos, the bit I try and my hardest to leave alone in the videos where I'm doing something more involved with the formulas and stuff. So it's quite nice for me to be able to do some design work for you. So let's insert, and again, just using the drag and drop principle for the time being. I like to add a footer. My footer I typically like to do with a version number. And the reason I put a version number is that Power Apps has a tendency to have a little delay in loading up the latest published version for the first time. Once it's loaded, it's fine. But the first time it tends to be a little bit slow on the uptake. So I tend to put a little version number in somewhere, particularly while developing. I might drop it when the app goes live, but that enables me to see when my changes are coming through. Stops me going mad late at night when I'm developing something like so. Right, so if we go File, Save, and Publish, and remember, we've done nothing responsive with this. We've just literally put those elements on the page. We'll get into that in a moment. So this is your standard stuff. And we come onto this page here. And if we hit refresh, I'll probably speed this up. There you go. We've got a header and we've got a version 1. Now, the reason I've done this like this to begin with is to show you what you get to begin with and what it means when you go responsive. So you can see I've got all this dark space around the outside now that the app's published. Basically, when you have a non-responsive app, you get a set rectangle, and it's either portrait or landscape, depending on if it's mobile or desktop. So you get this fixed space. Now, what that means is if we resize our screen, like so, oh, and that's gone to mobile. We'll come back to that in a moment. But if we said had a smaller screen, now a sort of more simple screen like this would actually fit the app quite well, but I can't see my version number in the bottom corner. So you see it starts to cut stuff off. Now, you've got a couple of different things that will happen depending on your browser. and depending on how you load it to begin with. If I reload that, I'll now also get it shrunk even further, and I'll get bigger grey spaces down here, and I can pull that in here, and you see it's sort of sitting the app to stay roughly in the middle of wherever it is. Nothing responsive about that at all. And if I reload that from there, it will shrink even further. So this has got some fundamental problems. If you're building a large-scale solution for the whole organization, you don't know what screen size people are going to be working on. You're going to get all sorts of different sizes of your app, small, big, squished, not squished, and so on. It also means if you have a set, say, font size for your organization, that can be squished smaller as well. So actually, you might set that to 14 or 13 or whatever it might be, but on your app, it would render far smaller. And actually, you're then no longer having an accessible font size that you've set as an organization. So that's some of the real basic stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do before I get into the real design of my app is I'm going to enable responsive. So let's just put that back up to full screen for a second. And again, look, you see this tiny little box in the middle. But let's refresh that. And we've gone back up. So it's not too bad on my big screen once I've got it reloaded for the first time. Yeah, so if you've got a nice big monitor, it's probably not too bad. But let's get rid of some of this grey stuff around the outside. Now what we do is if we go to the settings, under display, and scroll down, you'll see you've got a few settings. Now I've got a landscape app with the default sizing. There's different sizing as well. That would give you different size rectangles. So you can start to think about having just a fixed dimension if you want to of a different size, but you still get the same problems that we had a moment ago where it's just that fixed dimension. But if we turn scale to fit off, what it now means is that the canvas will fit the screen, and everything inside it will then be need to be rendered within whatever the screen size is going to be. So let's start by just turning that off. Now this automatically gets rid of the lock aspect ratio feature because obviously it's going to automatically resize. What you can do is that you can lock orientation. So if you always want a landscape app, you can always have a landscape app. But if you don't, and if you want to do a mobile one at the same time, which we can do with responsive design, you can then leave that off. So we're going to leave that off for what I'm going to show you today. And that's it. So let's just iterate up my version number by a 0.1 and go File, Save, and Publish. It doesn't seem to be time either. It just seems to be eventually, there we go, eventually we'll get 1.1. Now, a couple of things have happened since we've last looked at our app. The first thing you'll notice, well, actually, you might notice different things. So the first thing I notice is we've now got a nice big white canvas that fits all the way to the outside of our screen. Brilliant. However, my version 1 seems to be somewhere in the middle for some reason, even though it was in the bottom right-hand corner. And my header seems to be somewhere off to the left-hand side. This is because we used the drag and drop snap to approach. We dragged it into position and that set it at a particular width. And that's whatever number the canvas was, however big the canvas was before. So what you can really see here is that the canvas was about that wide before and about that high before at its standard resolution. So we've gained a whole load of space, which is a great plus, but now we've got pieces that don't fit the page. This is where we start moving into how we build responsively. So from this point forward, I'm going to start showing you how I work when I set up an app. We're going to leave our header in place, we're going to leave our footer in place. I'm going to rename them, and they're then going to become the base of my build. So label 4, obviously I threw a few labels on before I started this video. Label 4 is now going to be my header. So I will name this master header, right? Something really simple like that. So I've now got a master header. And labeling these will become really important in a moment. I'm also going to do master footer, okay, like so. Now, the way I will work whilst I'm doing this is I will start to use different things as reference points for where the item is going to be positioned. And so what I mean by that is if we want to set something to appear on the screen under the header, I will say be underneath the header. So I need to reference it, hence the reason I name it. Now that will make hopefully a little bit more sense as we go through. So I'm going to start with my master header. So I've got a master header called header. And my master header is size because I dragged and dropped. And you can see the width, if you look down the side here, is 1366. 1366 is kind of the standard Canvas app width. That is what makes the bar stop at this point here, 1366. That's where that gets to. So we need to make sure that this is going to grow or shrink with our app. So the way we do that, and I say so a lot, and this is the way I'm going to cut that out now because I've caught myself doing it, right? The way we do this is we use the app canvas and we start to write formulas instead of numbers. So if I take my width, by clicking on the width, that will actually put it into our formula bar at the top tip. We're going to take the number out and we're going to use the app's size as our base point. So we can reference app dot. An app dot will then give you loads of information about the app itself. Design height, design width, height, minimum screen height, minimum screen width, active screen, size breakpoint, so on, so on, and so on. There's a whole bunch of different bits of information that we can set around the app or we can reference from the app. So I'm going to reference the app width. So if I say app.width, at the moment that will be equal to 1366, but basically what that means is whatever the app width is, be that. Yeah. So we're going to now do the same for our master footer. So because these are masters, most of the master items that I create will always reference the app. I start to create a hierarchy and we'll get into that. Oh, not width, height, width. Like so. We'll start to get into that as I move forward with the app design work here. So that's our positioning, our width, okay, sorted out. So let's just pause there, take a look at what version 1.2 will look like. If we go File, Save, and Publish. Now you can use the preview. What I find is that the preview is not 100% when you get into things like responsive design, and I find it much more efficient to just test it live, published. You know, I would probably be building in a dev environment anyway, so just publish it, have a look what it looks like, and just continue to tweak. Up to you. But let's refresh this. And there we go. First time that time. Doesn't happen always, but so what we've got now is we've got version 1.2. It's over at the right hand side, and my header is run all the way across the top. Perfect. But why is my version 2 floating in the middle of the screen? It's not down in the bottom left hand corner still. Well, that's because we haven't positioned this item to be down at the bottom of the screen. This is positioned at the top because it's at 0, so it's always going to be at the top. But this was positioned by drag and drop, so we need to rectify that as well. So back into our app, here's our footer, and what we can see now is that the width has got a formula in it, great. The height is set at 40, we'll come back to that in a moment, but the Y position is set at 7288. And that again is because I dragged that item down to the bottom and placed it there. That is the position on the screen it took up when I drag and dropped. So if we click on the Y, and we're going to go in here and we're going to write another formula. So we're also going to say that we want this to be app.height is the first part of the formula, but that's going to put it not quite in the right place because the app.height is obviously the very, very bottom of the screen. So we put it all the way down to there. The next reference that I'm going to use to create my formula is a really handy one called self. So any control, any item, any thing that you build in Canvas app can reference itself using self dot. And then self dot will give you a list of all of the properties to do with that item that we can reference. So I'm going to create a sum. So we're going to start at the height, but then we're going to take away self dot height. So come back up however high I am. And there you go. That positions that back to where it was a minute ago, but dynamically at the very bottom of the screen. So whatever the height of the screen is, yeah, take away the height of myself. That's where I want to be. Okay. So that's a really good starting point. So we've got a header and a footer, header at the top, footer at the bottom, and we're going to go one last time. And it's not going to be one last time. We're going to publish it loads of times, and I will speed up all the publishings as I go through. This is why I put a version number. Haha! And now my version number is back down the bottom where we want it, because it is saying be at app.height less my own height. Great. So we've done that. We've positioned the footer at the bottom. We've set the width of everything. Header is set in the right position because it's always going to be at 0, because 0 is the top. So it'll always be there. But what we need to do now is we need to just have a little think about the height of these items, because if you've got a really tall screen or a really short screen, you're going to want to either make them sort of bigger or smaller depending on the space you've got available. So from practice, I've got a few numbers in mind, but I'm going to show you there's a couple of number forms that you can do here. But because I want to use the height of the app, we want to do something with that to make the header the right size. So what we can do here is we can say that the height of our header is currently at 40. Now I typically like one to be about 50. About 50 in a standard app size is just what I like. Yeah, 40 to 50, lovely. So we're going to do app.height, right? So we want to base this off of the height. So if the height changes, we change the height of our label. But app.height is obviously the whole thing. And because these are formulas, what we can do here is we can divide. So I'm going to divide the height of this app by about 12. That's not quite enough, but that's given us a height of 64. You can see the output in the box over here on the right hand side. Probably a bit more for my liking, so let's go to 14. There you go, look, 54 is not bad. Let's do 15 just because it makes it a more aesthetically pleasing number, and it makes my item 51. That's good, I like that. So we can do app.height is 15. Let's do the footer as well. App.height divided by 15. Now, we've done that the same way. There's obviously a consideration if you want them to always be the same size, that you'd always have to update them, but we're going to tackle that problem in a moment, don't worry. So let's just publish that. Oh, actually, just before I publish that, let's just show you some of the difference in sizes. What I can also do here, so now I've got a header, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to illustrate the height. So if we do header height, oh, can't spell, and we do that, and we say and, remember I said we can reference self? We can do self.height, and there we go. It tells me how high this is. Let's illustrate it for you. Let's show you how high it actually is. Header height is 51.2. Let's go for File, Save, Publish. See, it sometimes doesn't play ball, and if you can't notice it, there we go. So the header height is now 68.733333333. Now, the same is true down here on our version number. We just don't have any fill or numbers on there to make that visible. But as you can see, we're now making the height of this header responsive to the height of the screen. Great. So we're really starting to get some basics in there. Now, let's start thinking about positioning some other stuff on the page. And let's get rid of our height. That'll just become a header. Okay, oop. Right, so back to that. Now we've got our header, we've got our footer. What I also like to do is I like to put in a subheader quite often. Slightly smaller header, so this might actually say something like the name of the app. So this is responsive app. Whatever, I'm just sort of making it up really. And we go insert a new label. Okay, so we've now got a new label. So this label here is actually going to become my sub master. Oh, can't type, but sub master header. And all will become clear as we start doing this next step of design, because we're going to start to use the items to start positioning things on the screen. So submaster header, let's have a think of what the text should be and the fill and all those sorts of things. So let's just make it a slightly lighter shade of that one. In fact, we could go that way. I'm going to start overthinking this, aren't I? Right, that will do. Let's make that text a dark color, like so. I'd probably have it with a hint of green in just to be really, really picky. And then we could say this might say something like home screen. It doesn't need to say the word screen. Could just say home. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we need to position this. So again, we're doing away with drag and drops. There's no point in dragging that where we need to drag it. It can just be anywhere on the page. We're going to start doing some of our position work. Now, this is where we start looking at the X, the Y, the width, and the height. So the X is how far from the left it is, and the Y is how far from the top it is. If we're doing a header all the way across the screen, the X position is always going to be 0. It's always going to start on the left-hand side. It's going to go all the way across to the other side, right? So 0 is fine. That's easy. What about the Y position? Where do we want that? Well, we want that just underneath our header, don't we, really? If makes sense logically to just be underneath our header. So Y would be master header, because we can reference anything in our app, dot height. Ta-da! And that puts it directly underneath, and that will always be directly underneath, even if the header changes size, it gets bigger or smaller. It will literally be there underneath it as it should be. The other thing I like to do, this is just being really picky, is I like to add 2 pixels between my header and my subheader. I think it just gives it a nice little white, bit of detail. So I'm going to just do that because it's a habit. Now we've done left position, we've done down position, X and Y. We need to do the width. Now we can start to build this sort of parent-child relationship here. Now, master header references the app. Actually, what I now want to do is I want subheader to reference the master header. So if I update the master header, the subheader will behave in line with it. Makes my life easier later on as a developer. So what I can do here is I can just do master header dot width. Done. Easy as that. The height, now because it's a subheader, I might make it slightly smaller than my master header. So let's say master header dot height. But let's divide that by, I know what we'll do, let's make it like 3/4 the size. So to make it 3/4 the size of the header, we would divide it by 4 times it by 3. Simple sums, yeah? If you divide it by 4, you've got 1/4, times it by 3, you've got 3/4. Easy peasy. So it's now ever so slightly smaller than the header above it. And the last thing we need to do is we now need to put these in a nice place. Now what you could do is you could just center this, it'd be underneath. Actually what we might do is we might align that to the right, put some padding in of say about 50 just to pad that in. We might align that to the right, and we make that 50, and we might, there you go, start to build up a bit of a design to our app, something like that. Because then what we might have is we might have a menu down the left-hand side that people can use. So, give it some design, some thought, some thinking. This is just examples. So let's have a look at what that looks like. Now, I don't need to iterate the version really because we'll see quite a lot of obvious changes. So let's go File, Save, Publish, and show you how that positions itself and how that behaves. First time. I love it when it goes first time. In fact, I didn't put any sizing on this one, but we'll come back to sizing in a moment because I want to do a bit of work with that as well. So responsive app, home screen, positioned underneath, little spacing underneath, little version control in the middle. So let's just show you what happens now if we start using different screen sizes. If I minimize this, whoop, everything repositions itself nicely in line with what my app size is. And if I start to squish it, it moves in. Make it really long. Okay, that's probably really too long and narrow, and that font's probably too big, but we're going to do something with the font in a minute anyway, so we can take that into consideration. So nice and tall, everything responds, everything goes big. If we went down to mobile, we haven't done anything specifically to make it mobile, but it's kind of mobile ready. Yeah, so we'll come to that in a second. So we've just got to do font size, mobile ready, and then we've probably close out for the foundation work of responsive design. Right, back into our app. So the next thing we need to do, let's just do some font work for a second. There's a number of different things that we can do with this. Now, we could start to introduce rules that look at the app size, as we've done before. So we could say be this particular height, this particular width. We can also introduce rules that say, actually, if you go into mobile view, let's make sure that we cover that off. So there's a mobile phone screen might be narrower, might be smaller, so we might want a different font size, we might want different positioning. So we'll come to that in a moment. Let's just stick with the desktop for a second. Font size, and there's a number of different ways of doing this. A really simple way to do it is to reference yourself dot height. These are just examples of how you can do it. Basically, they're formulas. If I do self dot height, it's going to make the font 51.2. If I then divide that by 3, oh, I didn't press 3. There we go. Divide that by 3, we'll actually end up with a height of 17. That's not too bad. That's probably not a bad height, because again, we'll get a bigger font size as we go up and a smaller font size as we go down. So I'm probably going to use that to begin with and see how that comes in. I'm also going to do the font size for my subheader. And then what these do, I do these once. I set these rules up on my header and my subheader, and everything in the app then references it. Anywhere I need to do a header, master header dot size. Anywhere I need to do like a body text, sub master header dot size. And we'll show you that when we put a button or something on the page in a moment. So let's just do this one. So let's do self dot height. Oh, slef. Self dot height. Let's see what divided by 3 gives us on this one. 12. Not a bad font size. There's ways to protect the font size. You want to keep it set, and I'm going to cover those hopefully towards the end of this video. If not, it'll be in the more detailed videos where we start looking at desktop versus mobile. That's going to be the big transitional point where we start getting into some far more complicated, I say complicated, far more involved formulas. So that might come in the follow-up video. Let's just stick to the foundations for now. Let's get them right. So that's that. Now what we can do with our footer, actually we can say to our footer, font size, be sub master header dot size, because that's what we're looking at, the size of the font. So that will now set that to 12.8 as well. So that will change and grow exactly the same as the other one. Subtle change, version 1.4, file, save. There we go, right, and you can see the font's actually popped up a little bit in size if you look very carefully at that. So that there, and I could have put the size on visually on the screen, but if we just minimize, come on, please. That's worked really quite nicely for the mobile app. It's nice when it works first time. As we change the screen size, let's shrink the height down a little bit. You see, the font size shrinks inside the size of the item. Now that's obviously really, really small. As I said, later on in the slightly more involved version, we'll show you how you can set the font size to a particular number and protect that across different screen sizes. But for now, let's just leave it responsive. Let's make it flex with our app. So we've got a really nice, simple, effective way of managing those font sizes. Last couple of bits, I think we can recap, sign that off, finish that up as our base level thinking for responsive design. And we'll do a follow-up video of that more involved desktop versus mobile, formula-driven app build thinking. Right. Right's now replaced so, but I did stop saying so. Here we are. Let's get this next part done. So let's position. We're going to do, I don't know, let's just insert a label. Okay, that font's color seems to be defaulting to white for some reason, but let's just make it that. And in fact, this is where you can really go for it, to town on it, right? And actually, we can start thinking about how we set all of our font colors. So everything could be set from a reference point, which is why I like the master header subheader sort of approach. Subheader could define all of the dark text. So if we did dot color, okay, we've now got this text label here. If we then come here and change this, and there are obviously better ways of doing like a central color reference point. This is a fast way of doing it. We could come in here and let's say we want to make that font red. That turns red, but also that turns red. So if you always reference that as you're setting your pieces up, you can very quickly change everything in one fell swoop without having to build anything sort of really smart and clever behind the scenes, like a data table or a color picking screen or whatever it might be. You can just have a reference point in the app, edit the app, change the color very quickly. It's a rudimental way of getting that sort of really quick and easy updatable app to go through. So you can reference things for things like color, size. So let's do the font size. So we would do sub master header dot size. And that will mean that that will be the same size as that. So if we one day said to a size of this, let's make it divided, let's just make it the same height, just to make it really obvious. That would get really big, that would get really big, and that would get really big because they are all referencing this one master control. You can see why I was building a master control in. They all look after each other. You get this parent-child relationship right the way through your app. Really good way of building fast, quick, scalable, amendable, changeable apps. Right. See, right, it's replaced so. My label here is going to have some text on it. Now I'm going to position it in a minute, but let's just have some text on it. This is going to say, please click the button, right? Just to show you positioning some stuff on a page and how they can relate to each other. Let's center that text and let's just leave that there for a second. We'll position it in a moment and we're going to insert a button. Now buttons, they come out either really good or really not so good, and this has come out okay, is what I'll say about that. I tend to get rid of the border radius because I like little rounded buttons. I also don't like semi-bold. I just like normal font. Thank you very much. And what we might do here is we might say to the font size, right, let's, because it's a button and it's an action, let's be master header dot size. Let's be the big one. Yeah, let's be the larger because it's an action. Why not? It doesn't have to be. In fact, I'm already not liking it, but there we are. Right, so what we can do with our button, let's think about the colors. So colors of a button are a fun thing to look at. They've got a few different rules to them. So they have got the color it is, the fill color, the background color. They've got a hover color that changes as you hover your mouse over. They've got a pressed color. So you press the color and it goes a different color. So they've got a few different colors there. They've also got the same things for font color. It's got a color, a hover color, which is actually the same in this scenario, and a pressed color. And that's actually not too bad. However, if we change the color of our app, that wouldn't fit in very well. If we said, oh, all of a sudden, let's make our header red, yeah, that would be green, and then I'd have to go and color it in. So we can do the same set of thinking with our button. So we can say to the properties of our button, we can go through all the different things that there are. So you've got the button color. Okay, so what the button color, sorry, that's the border color. I need to read. It's, yeah, it is what it is. I'm going to leave the border color for now. I probably won't. I'll probably come back to it in a minute. But we can scroll down here. We've got the color. So the color is the font color. So at the moment it's white. But what we could do here is we could reference. Now it's going to be light on dark. As you can see, that's going to be the sort of color that we're going for. So we're going to do master header dot color. It's be the same color as whatever you make that header. So that's master header dot color. There is a disable color. I'm not going to disable the button at the moment, so I don't really need to worry about it. The pressed color is going to be the fill color, which is great. That's a good reference of self. So if I press it, it's going to be whatever the dark color is. So I like that. I'm going to keep that. The hover color, so the font color when you hover over it, that can stay white as well, but we could also reference something if we wanted to there. The fill color we're going to make master header dot fill. So be that dark fill from the top. There we go. So be that same color up there. And then you've got the pressed color, which is being self dot color. So be white. That's fine. I'm happy with that. And then we've probably got the same with the pressed dot fill. Oh, the hover fill we need to worry about, because the hover fill is again, sort of coded number. Now they're using this color fade, which I think actually is a good way of doing it. So we'll leave the color fade in. It's just fading the color by 20%, but we want to reference self.fill. Okay, so whatever I am now, 20% shaded off. And now the reason all those are important is now if we then, as we did before, change that to red, our button goes red. And if we hover over our button, it hovers a red color. If we press the button, it stays white and the text goes red. So all of that is referencing our header color. Great, right? So that makes life much easier. And then what I tend to do, so I tend to spend a lot of time getting one button right. Again, for the faster builds, I would then copy and paste that and use that throughout my app. If I was doing a bigger build, I would make it a component. But we won't touch on components today because that will muddy the waters and get us confused on what we're trying to think about today. But components will be in a future video. Watch this space. So we've got a button, and what I want to do is I want a second button. I'm going to put a button on the left and a button on the right. So there we are, button 1 and button 2. Let's call them button 1. Come on. And button 2. There we go. Oh, let's make our header back to the right color. So again, because we've copied and pasted that, it's still referencing the main header. So if we update the main header, they'll all update because we copied and pasted and we saved ourselves some time. So we've got this piece here, piece here, piece here. And we need to put these all on the page somewhere nice. So this is going to be an easy one for this particular demo because I want it bang in the center. Now there's a few different ways for it, but I'm going to show you the formula that you will learn. I'm going to put this bang in the center of the app, so there, but obviously we need to position it properly. So let's say we wanted to make the width of this something like, no, let's do it responsive. Let's do it properly, right? So let's start from the width. So let's say we want the width of this text box to be app.width divided by 2. We wanted it half of the size because it was going to be, something like that. Now there's a number of different things we can use this for then later on. So this is, please click the button, half the width of the app, and we can then say to the height. Now this is where we start using things for reference. I want this to be the same height as the master header, because that's the height of all of my big labels. I pressed H, there we go. So that will now be the same height as that. We will set the font size already. It's going to be the same size as the underneath one here. We need to position it. So the X position and the Y position. Now this is where we start using the formulas that I really think you need to remember. So the X position, and we are very nearly the end of this session, the X position is going to be app.width divided by 2. So we want half of the app, but we also want half of our own width. So we're going to take away self.width divided by 2. So if we do the simple maths on that, we're saying the starting position, the very beginning point of this, needs to be half of the app, so which would be about here. And then we need to be back half of ourselves. And that puts us smack bang in the middle of the app. The next thing we need to do is we need to do the Y position. I've just undone the X position because I dragged it. This is the other thing, you can't drag and drop anymore. Get that out of your habits. So it needs to be app.width divided by 2 minus self.width. Come on, give me width, please. Divided by 2. Let's put that back. Thank you. No more drag and drop. Okay. The Y position, where do we want this to sit? Now, there's a number of different ways that we can do this. So we would like to put I mean, from a design perspective, you'd probably want to put the buttons somewhere in the middle of the screen so they're aesthetically somewhere nice, and the label would probably just go above those. So let's position that in a second. Let's put our buttons in place. A couple of different ways to do this. I would like to put these buttons in relation to this label. I could also do it across the width of the screen. Some really nice ways of doing, you know, like a position for like 4 buttons or a few buttons and so on. But I'm going to base it on our label. Okay, so let's look at our buttons. So let's start with the X position of this one. So this is label 7. Again, we could name this something really nice like home screen label. Just for now, that'll do. And we can then say to this button, the X position will be dot X. They're all referenceable properties. There we go, lovely. So be there. We haven't done anything with the width, so let's do the width. We could do the width of that divided by 4. Probably be divided by 3. That would probably be divided by 3. Oh, dot width. Got to reference the width before you can divide it by anything. Divide by 3. Yeah, that's not bad size. That will do us for the purposes of this particular video. And then we're going to copy that width across to the other button. Let's do the same thing. Divided by 3. Lovely. So they're the same size. It almost looks in the right place, but we haven't positioned it yet. We can do the same for the height. You can multi-select if you can do the same rules. So let's do the height. And we are going to do, we could literally do that label dot height. So it's the same height as that, which is the same height as that. So actually it is cascading down as parent and child models. So you know what's in charge of what. And again, if we up the height of this, just for demo purposes, and said, actually, let's make that by 10, everything gets bigger. Can you see font, size, label, buttons, everything? Too big, too big. There we go. Whoa. Divided by 15. That looks pretty good to me. X position of this one, well, we're going to reference this label again. So the X position for this is quite straightforward. We're going to start off, I say quite straightforward, it's a bit more of a formula, but we're going to start off at the X of that one. But then we need to go forward by the width of that. And then back by our self.width. Right, and so what that basically means is we start here, we jump forward to the width of this, and it's the starting point of this button. Remember, the starting point would be here, and then we take away our width to plonk us back to exactly where we need to be. So we now got a really nice positioned set of buttons. The last thing we want to do is we want to put the buttons visually in the middle of the screen and move the label up in relation to those buttons. So they're starting to reference each other to position really nicely on the page. So the Y position of our buttons, we can do those together because they're going to be the same. We're going to be app.height. This is the same as the set bang in the center of the at left and right. App.height divided by 2, just referencing the height instead of the width. And we're going to take away self.height divided by 2. Smack bang in the middle of the page. So visually a really nice place to put them. And the last thing we want to do to this is we're going to put this label so it sits right above the buttons, probably in a very nice position. So we can take button 1 and we can say to the Y position of this be button 1 dot Y. Yeah, so it's actually, it looks quite nice like that. I won't leave it like that. I want to move it up above it. Minus self.height. And if you don't like it right on top of it, because of the borders and the overlapping, because borders are outside the text box, you can do that times 2. Come on, 2. Thank you very much. And that's times 2 of the height, not of the whole formula. So self.height times 2. So it's that twice. And I think that will do us. I think that puts us in a nice position to show you what that looks like and probably wrap up there and do a more complicated version of this video. A more involved version of this where we start to build on this stuff and build up the formulas into slightly more workable models for things like mobile versus desktop. Let's do a nice final version 5 like so. save. Ta-da! Now we have got some buttons. They don't do anything, obviously. We didn't do anything with them. We've got please click the button or buttons. We've got version 5. We've got font. We've got positioning. Everything sort of seems to be in the nice place. But if we then go down to our smaller screen size, look, we've squished our buttons narrower because we've gone narrower. The font size changed. The height's changed. Everything's repositioned itself in the middle. Move it wider, same thing. Go down to mobile phone size, probably a bit too small, but as I said, in the next video, we'll do a rule on mobile phone sizing and we'll cover that off for you. So I think we've got pretty much everything we need out of this video here. So I'm going to do a bit of a recap. Responsive design, fundamentals, that's given us a really good base to be able to build up that knowledge in the follow-up video that I'm going to do for you. The follow-up video will focus very heavily on being able to do a desktop and a mobile screen that responds and changes depending on whether the screen size is on a mobile phone device or on a desktop. So you can have better font sizes, protected font sizes, and things like that. So there's a little bit more thinking involved for the formulas. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the insight into starting a responsive design video and some of the build principles I like to put in place. I've been Daniel Halls. This has been Power Platform Principles. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you like, subscribe, visit the channel, pop any comments on that you've got, and I will always do my best to answer them for you. Thank you very much.